The performance director of our sport said, "You're going to do what I tell you to do." I said, "Well, what we're doing is just not working. We've got to do something different." And so I dropped myself from the national team.
Was rowing the thing that you were always drawn to, or were you pushed to it? Was your family sporty?
I certainly wasn't pushed. When I went to secondary school, I'm still live in Marlow in Buckinghamshire, where I was born and bred. Of Jack, my father wasn't in submarines. He was on top of the water. He was in the Merchant Navy. If he went underneath, I think that would have shocked him completely. But he was from the Marlow area as well. And I've got two elder sisters. One 5 years older than the other one's 9 years older than me, and we all went to the same secondary school, small comprehensive school in Marlow. And the head of the English department loved two sports. One was rugby and the other was rowing. Great Marlow School didn't do either of those sports, but he became captain of Marlow Rowing Club. And he always talks about that as the new intake of students came into the secondary school, he would look at the size of their hands and feet. And if they had big hands and feet, then he would then go to them and ask them if they wanted to try rowing. I'm heavily dyslexic. It really struggled educational-wise at school. And so I used to love sports. I was quite an explosive sport. I was quite a good sprinter. Before I got into rowing, which isn't about sprinting at all, it's the complete opposite. And he just sort of asked a few individuals if they wanted to give it a go. And I worked out very quickly. So I think being dyslexic doesn't mean you're not bright. And I worked out that if you've got do rowing, we are not like Eton that have an international Olympic rowing course in your back garden. We had to go down to the river, so you had to leave school to go and do the sport. And so that's where I was in. There was 12 of us from our year group that he asked. Within 3 weeks, that 12 came down to 4 because nobody else was interested in doing it. And I fell in love with it immediately, and sort of things moved on from there relatively quickly. I was 14 when I started, so a little bit younger than you, John.
So when did you both realise that not just that you were good, but that you could both be brilliant? Steve?
With the background of the private schools that Jack spoke about, is that in our first year, 1976, as 14-year-olds, we raced 7 times in a coxed 4, and we won all 7. We thought we were the God's gift of rowing. It wasn't until probably about 20 years later of looking back on the sort of humble beginnings, is your Etons, your Radleys, your Shrewsburys have a first 8, they'll probably have a second 8, Eton will have a third 8 even before they break down into smaller boats. And so that we were never racing our peers of the top athletes in our year group, because they were all put into doing 8s, because that's what you do within the sport. We couldn't find 8 people to row, so we did 4s. But what that led us to do is that because we won 7 in 7, the next year at junior 15 we entered 15 and we only won 8. That's because we thought we were the God's gift of rowing, so we didn't train as hard through the winter. And there's a saying in rowing, if you don't, you depend on how much training you do in the winter, it depends how fast you go in the summer, and there's a lot of truth in that. And so we hid round the corner a few times and didn't quite train as hard as we should do, but lost a few races and lost races to the kids that we were beating the year before. That then, a lesson learned, we motivated. So our next year, junior 16s, we won everything in our age category and was very competitive in the juniors, where you're racing 1 and 2 years older boys within your category. And that's where people at Marlow Rowing Club, we had 3 coaches that also coached internationally. They didn't coach us, but they were away with the national team, and 1 athlete that was a lightweight world champion. And they were saying to me, "You've got the capability of being a world champion." And you're thinking, "Oh, world champion, that sounds nice. Why not Olympic champion?" And so from the age of 15, 16, I started focusing on that I wanted to be Olympic champion. By that time, my father had left the Merchant Navy, done a few other jobs, but set up his own company, a building company. So I was brought up on building sites, annoying builders of jumping off the scaffolding into their building sand, which they didn't really like very much. So I knew the building industry very well, but because of coming from a working class background almost into a middle class background, my two sisters had a much tougher upbringing than I did, is that my parents saw that there was a talent because of the results that we were getting and wanted to support me through. So I worked with my father on the building sites. He used to call me the foreman because I used to go training in the morning, turn up, have my hands in my pockets, watch him do the work, we'd stop, have lunch, and then mid-afternoon I would say, sorry Dad, I've got to go training again now. And sometimes I actually did go back training, quite often I didn't. And so it was that sort of humble beginning. So if you got a trophy with your name engraved on it, I thought that my name was engraved on the Olympic trophy at some stage, but I just didn't know when. And it took a long time to realise, even if you have a talent for something, you've got to get the best out of that talent to be able to get the best awards within that. And that's the whole learning process as you go through the process.
So both your careers, you know, there's obviously ups and downs. Most of the time you talk about the ups and, you know, the winning and the cheerful stuff. But how have you both sort of picked yourself up when times are hard? You know, what is it that's made you come back?
I want to answer the same question as John's just answered.
No, go on, then.
Is about the big decision, because for me it was relatively simple. I could see a path through, but as a sport we were just doing the same things over and over again, and we were getting better at getting bad. So there was one point, these coaches that said I could be good, you start believing it, you move in a certain direction, you follow the system, you follow what the coaches tell you, and you've got to rely that system is going to then deliver. We're talking about of early 80s, where British sport was not in a very good place at all, and that we weren't winning very many Olympic gold medals, we weren't doing very well in many other sports. And I actually turned it around and went and looked at businesses and looked at how business structured themselves, and realised that as a good athlete coming through, I was doing it very amateurish. East Germany was the country that was dominating our sports at that time, through the 60s, 70s and for most of the 80s as well. And they were full-time professionals and we were all part-time. And so in 1984, or the build-up to the end of 1983, is that the performance director of our sport said, you're going to do what I tell you to do. I said, well, what we're doing is just not working. We've got to do something different. And so I dropped myself from the national team, decided I'd go and do under-23s. Under-23s now is a very important stepping stone in our sport. But back at the early 80s, it wasn't. If you went to the under-23s, you're never going to make the national team. And so I wanted to make a step back. Through my coach at the time, a guy called Mike Spracklin, sort of path away for me to be able to come back in. But we had to do something different. So my big decision and my radical change was rebelling against the Amateur Rowing Association. Very apt name for them. They're called British Rowing now, and they do pretty good stuff. But then it was very amateur, and then people would say to me, look, why did you make that decision? Why did you stick your neck out? To me, that we had to make a change. I could have got it wrong. We could have got worse results or stayed at the same, but at least I went out to try and do something different. Fortunately for me, within 9 months from being eliminated at the World Championships in 83 to be Olympic champion 9 months later, in Sydney, and then once you find a path that gets you success, then you put even more vigour in it, and eventually the rest of the British team, coaches, administration followed the path as well.
So if you had to pick a good moment from your sporting career and your non-sporting career, what would you pick? Who's going
good,
first?
good moment for me. I always wanted to be a single sculler. I found out that I was a better team player than I was an individual. It took me a long time to work that one out, but I kept going back to single sculling. But I did win the Commonwealth Games in '86 in Edinburgh. We were actually at Strathclyde, but that's the boat though, and that's the best result I got in the single. That was the last race that I ever did in the single. I had raced a month before at Henley Royal Regatta and got beaten by a lightweight in the final, which was disgracing for a heavyweight to be able to do that. But again, you learn lessons from that. That lightweight was reigning lightweight world champion, and of not putting your research into of the people you're racing, is that I knew that he was good lightweight, but he shouldn't be able to touch an open weight athlete. I went off in the first minute. I got a boat length's lead at Henley, where there's only 2 lanes, and you're going backwards. If you can make a bigger gap, it's really hard for the person behind to come back. And so I pushed on harder than I should have done. Got to a marker called the barrier, and I was 3 lengths up, thinking the race is done and dusted. There's still another 7 minutes of racing to go, and this guy just ground me down and eventually came past me, rode me to a standstill. And the lesson I learnt there was never underestimate your opposition. Work out what their strengths and weaknesses are. If I knew that the way that he rode races, I would have raced in a different situation. So in rowing, that was bad. A month later, the best result that I had in a single scull, and I'm still reigning Commonwealth champion, because rowing hasn't been back in the Commonwealth Games since.
Yay! That's a good record to have. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.